October 11th, 2025, the day Hollywood stopped breathing, the day millions of hearts broke at once. Diane Keaton, the heartbeat of American cinema, the woman who made imperfection divine, was gone, 79 years old, and yet the world felt unprepared. Outside her Los Angeles home, the streets filled with silence. Fans left lilies and her iconic wide-brimmed hats like quiet prayers. Jane Fonda's voice trembled on live television. Leonardo DiCaprio called her a soulmate of courage. Reese Witherspoon said she turned vulnerability into art. And then came Goldie Hawn, her best friend for 3 decades, the one who shared every laugh and every heartbreak. Standing beneath the California sun, Goldie held a single white rose, whispering words so raw that even the cameras stopped moving. In that moment, the entire world seemed to cry with her. But behind the headlines and tributes, there is a story the world has not yet heard. A truth buried beneath the laughter and the light. Who was Diane Keaton when the cameras turned away? And what final vow did she leave behind for the people she loved most? Stay with us. Subscribe for more untold stories. And tell me in the comments, what year were you born? And when did Diane Keaton first make you believe in something real? 1. It was October 11th, 2025, the day Hollywood forgot how to breathe. The morning sun climbed slowly over Los Angeles, soft and golden, but the city felt wrong, almost hollow. The news spread faster than traffic on Sunset Boulevard. Diane Keaton was gone, 79 years old, the woman who made awkwardness beautiful, who turned loneliness into art, had taken her final bow, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the whole world stopped. Phones rang across the industry. Jane Fonda's voice cracked live on television. Leonardo DiCaprio called her the bravest heart Hollywood ever knew. Reese Witherspoon wrote that she showed the world beauty isn't about perfection, it's about courage. Outside her Los Angeles home, fans gathered quietly, laying lilies, her favorite flower, and lining up her famous wide-brimmed hats along the gate like silent tributes. Inside the house, time had stalled. Her glasses still sat beside a half-read script. A cup of coffee, untouched, had gone cold. Even the light coming through the curtains felt hesitant, as if it couldn't bear to leave the room where she had laughed, written, dreamed. 79 years, 4 Oscars, more than 50 films, but none of that could measure her. Diane Keaton was never just a number, never just a name. She was weather. When she laughed, it was spring. When she cried, it was winter. And when she left, it felt like all the seasons collapsed into one. That morning, people across the world watched old interviews just to hear her voice again. It wasn't just the end of a career, it was the end of an era. Diane didn't act for applause, Mom. She taught the world how to live truthfully and how to leave quietly, with grace that never fades. 2. Let's go back to where it all began, before the lights, before the laughter, before the name Diane Keaton meant anything at all. Back to a small house in Los Angeles, where dreams whispered louder than voices and love spoke in silence. It was January 5th, 1946. The city was warm, the world was rebuilding, and somewhere beneath those endless California skies, a little girl opened her eyes to a life that would teach her how to turn pain into poetry. Her father, Jack Hall, was a man of precision, a civil engineer who believed in rules, not tenderness. Her mother, Dorothy, once crowned Mrs. Los Angeles, 1955, was all light and grace until the applause stopped. She had dreamed of stages and songs, but those dreams were folded away between grocery lists and laundry. Their house looked like perfection from the street, with its white fence and manicured roses. But inside, silence ruled every room. Diane learned early that silence could be heavier than noise. She would watch her mother smile at dinner and see the light behind her eyes fade, just a little more each night. By the time she was 9, she had already decided she wouldn't live like that. In her notebook she wrote, "My mother's dreams live inside me, waiting for a door to open." At school, teachers thought she was odd. Classmates called her strange. But Diane wasn't lost. She was just rehearsing for a world that didn't exist yet. While other girls practiced penmanship, she was memorizing Katharine Hepburn's lines, chasing truth in front of the mirror. At 15, she stepped onto a high school stage for the first time. The spotlight trembled, and so did she. But for the first time in her life, that trembling felt right. It wasn't fear anymore, but it was freedom. By 1966, she packed a single suitcase, 2 scripts, and her mother's photo, then boarded a Greyhound bus to New York. The cold bit her skin as she stepped off into the city's roar. But she didn't flinch. That night, she dropped her father's name, Hall, and chose her mother's name, Keaton. It was her first act of courage, a quiet rebellion wrapped in love. Every time someone said, Miss Keaton, she heard her mother's name carried in the air like a small, unbroken prayer. And that was where everything truly began, in the silence that dared to become a voice. 3. It was 1966, winter in New York, the kind of cold that could cut through bone. Diane had just turned 20, carrying one worn-out suitcase, 2 scripts, and the kind of courage that doesn't look brave until it's all you have left. She stepped off the Greyhound bus and into a city that didn't care who she was. The snow was falling sideways, the air biting like glass, and she was just another dreamer trying not to disappear. Her first apartment was barely an apartment at all. A single room on the Upper West Side, walls the color of old paper, a radiator that coughed more than it warmed. Rent was $45 a month, which might as well have been $400. The wallpaper peeled like tired skin, and when it rained, water slipped through the ceiling like slow tears. She slept in her coat, wrote notes on scraps of newspaper, and told herself the draft was just New York's way of saying welcome. Days began before sunrise. She would walk blocks through the wind to stand in audition lines that stretched around corners. Most ended the same way. Too tall, too odd, too quiet. She was told she didn't fit the mold, but Diane had stopped believing in molds back in California. Between rejections, she worked as a waitress in diners thick with cigarette smoke, balancing trays while memorizing lines under her breath. At night, she sang in basement bars for $6 and a plate of soup, her voice trembling, soft but stubborn, like a flame refusing to go out. There were nights when she had no dinner at all. Once, she split a single sandwich into 4 pieces with another actress just to make the laughter last longer than the hunger. Once, she pawned her only good shoes for rent. She used to say later, "Fear became my engine." And it did. It pushed her through every dark street, every slammed door. Every night the cold felt endless. The city tested her, but it also shaped her. Every bruise became a brushstroke. Every no turned into a note in the song she was writing without even knowing it. Sometimes she'd press her hand against the window just to feel something real. The glass was icy, but it meant she was still here. Then, in 1968, after 2 years of scraping by, everything changed. A Broadway revival called Hair was looking for someone raw, someone unpolished, someone who didn't look like a star yet. Diane walked into the audition barefoot, her hair a mess, her heart on fire. She didn't perform to impress. She performed to survive. When she finished, the director didn't say a word for a long moment. Then finally he said, "Don't change a thing." That night, for the first time in her life, the lights hit her face not as judgment, but as warmth. The crowd didn't see perfection. They saw truth. She walked off stage shaking, not from fear, but from release. She wasn't invisible anymore. Hair became her first real paycheck, her first applause, her first proof that she belonged. She made $75 a week, and it felt like a fortune. She could finally buy dinner, a new coat, maybe even flowers for the tiny window ledge in her apartment. More importantly, she had found her language. Acting wasn't pretending for her. It was how she breathed. But even in that success, she stayed humble. Between shows, she still took the subway, still drank cheap coffee, still walked through Central Park just to listen to the city breathe. She wrote letters home to her mother, always signing them, Love, Diane Keaton, as if she needed to remind herself who she was becoming. The critics started to notice. The girl who didn't fit now couldn't be ignored. Her face was on playbills, her name whispered backstage. And yet, she never stopped feeling like that 20-year-old with a coat for a blanket. By the time 1970 came, she had spent almost 4 years in New York. She'd gone from sleeping beside a broken radiator to standing under the hot glow of Broadway lights. The transformation wasn't luck. It was defiance. Every rejection, every cold night, every empty stomach had carved her into something rare, an artist who understood that survival itself is a kind of art. Looking back, people saw her rise as sudden, but Diane knew better. It wasn't sudden. It was slow, brutal, beautiful work. Every word she spoke on stage was soaked in those lost winters, in hunger and hope, in the sound of a radiator coughing through the dark. She had no idea what was waiting for her, the fame, the awards, the heartbreaks, the legacy. But she had already learned the truth that would guide her forever. The world might not see you right away. It might turn its back, close its doors, and tell you to quit. But if you keep showing up, even in the freezing dark, someday the light finds you. 4. By 1972, Diane Keaton had become the kind of name people whispered in casting rooms and beneath the glow of Broadway marquees. 2 years earlier, she had been singing for Rent, and now she was standing on a film set beside Al Pacino, Marlon Brando, and James Caan. The movie was The Godfather, a production so massive it felt like its own country. Nobody expected much from the quiet girl playing Kay Adams, Michael Corleone's calm shadow. But when the camera rolled, something changed. Diane didn't just read her lines, she breathed between them. She brought tenderness into a world built on violence, light into the smoke. When the film was released in March 1972, it exploded. It earned more than $240 million, became one of the highest-grossing films in history, and turned its cast into living legends. For Diane, everything shifted overnight. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Scripts flooded in. Hollywood suddenly wanted her awkwardness, her pauses, her truth. But fame, as she would soon learn, was a strange kind of storm. One moment it lifts you high, the next it burns your wings. Then came 1977, Annie Hall, a love story that would change her life and rewrite what a woman on screen could be. Woody Allen wrote the role with her in mind and even used her real name. Annie Hall wasn't a character. It was Diane herself, nervous, radiant, unfiltered. The turtlenecks, the vests, the oversized pants, they were all her own clothes. When the movie hit theaters, it became lightning in a bottle. It won 4 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Actress. She was 31 years old. That night, standing under the stage lights with the golden statue in her hands, she trembled. People thought it was nerves. It wasn't. It was disbelief. After the ceremony, she didn't go to a party. She went home alone and placed the statue on her kitchen counter beside a glass of wine she never touched. The room was silent. The applause still echoed in her head, but it didn't fill the space. She looked at the Oscar and whispered, "Is this what it feels like to be seen?" That question stayed with her. Hollywood adored her, but adoration came with weight. Every new script carried a challenge. Can you ever be that good again? She worked harder than anyone, often rewriting scenes herself and rehearsing until dawn. She memorized entire scripts before filming even started. Her notebooks were full of sketches, ideas, coffee stains, and rewrites. Fear of failure became her compass. In 1981 came Reds, directed by Warren Beatty, a project so large it consumed years and nearly consumed her. Diane gave it everything she had, heart and exhaustion alike. Critics called her fearless. She called herself empty. After filming wrapped, she sat in her car and cried, not from sadness, but from the feeling that there was nothing left inside her. Reds went on to win 3 Oscars, and once again her name was everywhere, but fame could not fill the hollow she carried. Then came the 80s, slow and unforgiving. The Little Drummer Girl in 1984 barely recovered half its budget. Hollywood turned younger, faster, louder. People still said she was on top, but she knew she was slipping through the cracks. She started to disappear from premieres. Nights stretched longer. She drove through Los Angeles with the windows down, letting the cold air sting her face just to feel awake. She once told a friend that success didn't make her whole. It only gave her permission to be broken in public. Still, she didn't stop. Instead, she turned inward, writing, directing, creating work that meant something. She refused the offers worth millions because she wanted truth, not applause, to a young actress who asked her how to survive. She said softly, "The applause fades. The work is what saves you." By the end of the decade, Diane had built something stronger than fame. She had built endurance. She understood that light is not a gift, but a responsibility. Every sleepless night, every trembling hand, every private fear shaped her into an artist who no longer performed for approval but for meaning. The woman who once walked freezing streets in New York had become one of the most respected names in American cinema. Yet she carried a quiet truth within her heart. Greatness always comes with a quote. Fame can make you visible, but it cannot make you whole. She would later say that Hollywood was like standing in front of a mirror that only reflects what you already fear. Still, she never turned away. She kept looking. She kept learning. Because somewhere deep down, Diane Keaton had already discovered the truth. Most spend their lives avoiding. Sometimes the brightest lights in the world are the ones that burn you first. 5. It was 1996, the year everything shifted again. Hollywood was spinning with noise. Younger faces filled the screens, and Diane Keaton, 50 years old, quieter now, more deliberate, was about to find something she didn't know she had lost. That year, she joined Goldie Hawn and Bette Midler in The First Wives Club, a sharp comedy about heartbreak and survival. On set, laughter flowed like champagne. But behind the scenes, something deeper was happening. Diane and Goldie became inseparable. Two women who had spent decades under the same blinding lights finally found a friendship that felt real. They were opposites in every way. Goldie was sunlight, spontaneous, all sparkle and energy. Diane was restraint, calm, the kind of person who measured silence as if it were a language. Yet somehow, they balanced each other. One night, between takes on a cold New York street, Goldie noticed Diane shivering in her chair. She walked over and draped her own coat across her shoulders. She said softly, "You're always the strong one. Let someone else carry it for a while." Diane smiled, small and rare, and something cracked open. From that night on, they weren't just co-stars. They were co-conspirators against loneliness. For Diane, that friendship was a kind of rebirth. After years of working, proving, striving, she was finally learning to simply exist. Fame had given her everything except ease, and Goldie's laughter brought it back. They spent nights in hotel rooms talking about aging, love, and the strange emptiness that success never fills. Goldie taught her how to laugh again, not for cameras, but for healing. Diane used to say, "Goldie carried light armor, and she taught me how to breathe." But the biggest transformation was still to come. That same year, at 50, Diane made a choice that startled everyone in Hollywood. She adopted a baby girl. Her name was Dexter. Friends thought she was crazy. A single mother, 50 years old. At the height of her career, Diane just smiled. She said she was tired of applause that vanished by morning. She wanted something that stayed. Those early years of motherhood were messy and magnificent. There were bottles and scripts scattered on the same table, lullabies and late-night rewrites, exhaustion and joy tangled together. Diane burned toast almost every morning, forgot to brush her hair, and laughed more than she had in years. She once said, "I was afraid to be alone forever." And then she arrived. That little girl saved me. 5 years later, she adopted again. A boy named Duke. He was soft-spoken, curious, with a smile that could melt steel. Diane called him her anchor. Together, the three of them built a home that wasn't perfect, but it was real. Their kitchen smelled like coffee and crayons. Their walls were covered in photos and notes written in marker. "You're doing great," one read, scrawled by Dexter in crooked letters. To outsiders, Diane still looked like the composed icon in designer hats and tailored suits. But at home, she was just mom, dancing barefoot in the living room, watching cartoons with Duke, burning dinner, laughing until her sides hurt. She didn't care about being perfect anymore. She cared about being present. Hollywood noticed the change. Her work slowed, but her spirit didn't. She directed, wrote, and took roles that felt honest. Something's Gotta Give, The Family Stone, Because I Said So. In each one, audiences saw not a movie star, but a woman who had lived, broken, rebuilt, and learned how to love. In 2003, when she starred opposite Jack Nicholson in Something's Gotta Give, she was 57, and the film made more than $260 million worldwide. Critics called her performance luminous. Younger actresses said she made aging look like freedom. For Diane Wang, it wasn't a performance anymore. It was truth. Every laugh, every tear, every hesitant smile on screen came straight from the life she had built off screen. The woman who once feared silence now filled her home with music and noise. The chaos of love. She used to say that raising children taught her more about art than any movie ever did. Art, she said, is about showing up even when you're scared. That's what motherhood is too. By the time her children were teenagers, Diane had built something stronger than any legacy, a life that belonged entirely to her. She still wore her wide-brimmed hats, still took photos of sunlight on her kitchen floor, still walked through her garden every morning with coffee in hand. But the woman who once chased perfection was gone. In her place was someone softer, funnier, freer. She had learned that love doesn't have to be grand to be life-changing. Sometimes it's a note on a mirror, a child's laugh, or the warmth of a friend's coat on a cold night. Diane Keaton had spent decades chasing meaning through art, but in the end, it found her in the simplest places: in motherhood, in friendship, in laughter that no camera ever recorded. For the first time, she wasn't acting. She was home. It was October 11th, 2025. The morning sky over Los Angeles glowed pale gold, but something about the air felt heavy and slow, as if the city itself was holding its breath. At exactly 8:17 that morning, the news broke across every network. Diane Keaton had passed away, 79 years old. The woman who made awkwardness beautiful and honesty immortal was gone, and for a long moment, the whole world seemed to fall silent. Hollywood has lost legends before, but this felt different. It wasn't just the end of a career. It was the closing of a language of art. Her laughter, her stillness, her light had shaped generations. Jane Fonda's voice broke live on air. Leonardo DiCaprio called her a soul made of truth. Reese Witherspoon said she proved that beauty was courage, not symmetry. Outside her Los Angeles home, fans stood quietly, laying lilies, her favorite flower, along the gate. They placed her wide-brimmed hats on the sidewalk like silent lanterns guiding her home. Inside the house, time had stopped. Her reading glasses still rested beside a cold cup of tea. A camera sat by the window, aimed at her garden, its memory card still inside. The final image she captured was simple sunlight falling across a cracked tile floor. It was pure Diane, ordinary and divine at once. But beyond the headlines and tributes, the deepest silence lived inside her family. Her daughter Dexter whispered that it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. Her son Duke traced his fingers along the picture frames, the smell of cedar and perfume still floating in the air. The sound of her footsteps was gone, but her presence clung to every corner of the home. To the world, she was a legend. To them, she was the woman who hummed off key while flipping pancakes, who wrote little notes on the mirrors that said, "You are doing great," who called at midnight just to ask if they had eaten. Diane Keaton adopted Dexter in 1996 when she was 50 years old, stunning everyone in Hollywood. And 5 years later, she brought Duke into her life. She raised them through sleepless nights and long filming days. giving them a kind of love that didn't come from blood, but from choice. As the world mourned, another voice rose above the noise, Goldie Hawn. Her dearest friend, her mirror, her laughter twin, they had met almost 30 years earlier on the set of the First Wives Club and never let go of each other since. When the news came, Goldie stood on the veranda of her home in Pacific Palisades, staring at the ocean. For a long time she said nothing. Then softly she whispered, "Not Diane." Just a week before, they had laughed on the phone, talking about hats and aging and how love grows lighter when you stop pretending to carry everything. Before they hung up, Diane said, "Promise me you will keep laughing." At the memorial in Los Angeles, there were no flashing cameras, no red carpet, only sunlight, music, and tears. Goldie stood near the front holding a white rose, her fingers trembling. When she spoke, her voice cracked like glass. Diane was more than brilliant. She said, "Dombupaho." She was brave. She did not just make us laugh, Jermaine. She made us real. The silence that followed felt sacred. People wept openly. Others simply bowed their heads. For once, even Hollywood, a place built on performance, remembered what sincerity looked like. When the service ended, Goldie stayed behind. The light outside had turned golden, the same shade as Diane's hair under the studio lamps years ago. She placed the rose beside the portrait and whispered, "I will keep laughing for both of us." In the days that followed, her friends began sharing stories. They said she arrived early to every set, remembered everyone's name, thanked every crew member before she left. They said she always drank her coffee, black with one sugar cube, stirred counterclockwise, a tiny ritual that made her feel grounded. To younger actresses, she said, "Never try to be perfect. Try to be honest." In her final months, she lived quietly in Palm Springs. After the wildfires destroyed part of her Los Angeles home, she found peace in the desert. Every morning, she walked barefoot through the cool tiles with her camera in hand, chasing what she called small miracles. Light on stucco, the shadow of a leaf, the sound of wind moving through silence. Even as her body weakened, she kept creating. Every photograph became a prayer, a soft goodbye to the world she had loved so deeply. When she passed, theaters across America dimmed their lights. Before late-night screenings of Annie Hall, audiences stood for a minute of silence. Then the screen came alive again with her laughter, her voice, her truth. Somewhere in that moment, the world remembered what she had given it, not just art, but permission to be human. Outside her home, the lilies faded, but the hats remained. One fan left a note on blue paper that read, "You made me brave enough to be myself." Diane Keaton's story didn't end that morning. It continued in every artist who learned that imperfection is another name for authenticity, in every woman who learned that aging is not loss, but liberation. Her laughter, soft and defiant, still echoes somewhere between light and memory. Some lives end. Hers simply changed form, from flesh to feeling, from presence to legacy, because some souls do not disappear. They just find a quieter way to shine. 7. There are stories that simply pass through our lives, and then there are stories that stay, that linger in our hearts and quietly change the way we see the world. Diane Keaton's story belongs to that second kind. It is not about fame or beauty or the illusion of perfection. It is about truth, a truth that trembles, that laughs, that grows older with grace instead of fear. And maybe that is why, even now, long after her last scene, she still feels alive in every person who ever watched her and thought, "I know that feeling too." When you look at Diane's life, you can count the numbers. 50 films, 4 Academy Award nominations, 1 Oscar, a career that lasted more than 60 years and reached millions. But numbers never tell the whole story. What made her unforgettable was what happened between those numbers. The pauses in her voice, the cracks in her laughter, the way she embraced imperfection as if it were a form of art. She didn't perform to be flawless, she performed to be real, and that made her a revolution all by herself. What she left behind was not just a collection of movies, but a philosophy for living. She showed that strength is not about power or confidence. Sometimes it looks like showing up with shaking hands and doing it anyway. Sometimes it looks like aging in front of the world without apology. She proved that beauty is not about symmetry or youth, but about sincerity, the courage to be fully seen. Diane taught the world something Hollywood had almost forgotten, that authenticity outlasts glamour. She never pretended to be perfect. She wore her awkwardness proudly, laughed at her fears, and kept going when others would have stopped. In her, the world saw honesty in its most elegant form. She also reminded us that love is rarely tidy. It is fragile, unpredictable, and sometimes it hurts more than it heals. But she loved anyway. She loved her friends, her children, her work, and the world that often misunderstood her. She turned heartbreak into wisdom, loneliness into tenderness, and silence into something sacred. That was her quiet form of courage, to feel everything and still choose to shine. And maybe that is what her story teaches us now, that you do not have to be fearless to be brave. You do not have to have it all figured out to be enough. You just have to keep showing up, again and again, even when the light feels too far away. Diane once said that the applause fades, but the work saves you. What she really meant was that meaning lives in the small things, in the cup of coffee on a quiet morning, in a conversation that feels real, in the decision to stay kind in a world that rewards cruelty. If there is one truth her life leaves behind, it is this: you are allowed to be complicated. You are allowed to fall apart and rebuild yourself 100 times. You are allowed to grow old and still dream. Life does not ask for perfection. It asks for presence. So if you have ever felt invisible, or late, or lost, remember Diane Keaton. Remember the woman who made awkwardness powerful, who found beauty in her mistakes, who lived without pretending. She showed us that authenticity is not a weakness. It is freedom. Before you go, take a moment to think about what her story means to you. Maybe it is a reminder to forgive yourself more gently. Maybe it is the courage to start again. Or maybe it is the comfort of knowing that being real is enough. If this story touched you, if it made you see life differently, subscribe to the channel so we can keep sharing stories that speak to the heart. And tell me in the comments, what year were you born? And which part of Diane's journey reminded you of your own? Because no matter the year, her legacy belongs to all of us. The lights of Hollywood may fade, but her glow remains soft, steady, eternal, a reminder that being human, in all its flaws and beauty, is the greatest art of all. Art of all. Art of all. Art of all.